Maid's daughter paid cab fare for old lady, unaware she's Mafia boss's mom. The smell of industrial lemon polish had become a permanent part of Sofia Ramos's life. It clung to her hair, her uniform, and even the dry skin of her hands, no matter how many times she scrubbed them with lavender soap. At 23 years old, Sofia knew the geography of Harborview not by its streets or landmarks, but by the floor textures of its various buildings. She knew the plush, forgiving carpets of the executive suites in the financial district, the scuffed linoleum of the mid-range motels near the highway, and the cold, unyielding marble of the Grand Harbor Hotel, where she was currently on her knees, buffing a smudge that refused to disappear. Her back ached with a dull, throbbing rhythm that matched the ticking of the clock on the wall. It was nearly 7 in the evening. Most people her age were getting ready for drinks downtown or studying for finals at the university, living lives that felt as distant to Sofia as the stars visible through the smog of the city. She did not envy them, or at least, she tried hard not to. Envy was a heavy stone to carry, and she was already carrying enough. Sofia stood up, her knees popping in protest, and surveyed the room. It was perfect. It had to be. Her mother, Maria, had taught her that invisibility was the mark of a good maid. If a guest walked in and felt like magic had swept through the room, leaving no trace of the effort it took, then they had done their job. She gathered her supplies, dropping the spray bottles into her plastic caddy. Her shift at the hotel was over, but her day was far from finished. There was the commute home, the dinner preparation, and the careful balancing act of the household budget. She walked down the service corridor, the silence of the back hallways a stark contrast to the bustle of the lobby she avoided. When she finally stepped out of the service entrance, the city of Harborview greeted her with a damp, chilly gust of wind. It was late October, and the air held the promise of a bitter winter. Sofia pulled her thin coat tighter around her frame. She checked her phone. She had missed the express bus. The next local one would not arrive for another 40 minutes. She began to walk. Walking saved $2.50, and tonight, the cold felt like a fair trade for the savings. As she navigated the wet pavement, her thoughts drifted to Maria. Her mother had been cleaning houses in Harborview for 3 decades. Her hands were swollen with arthritis, her back permanently curved from years of bending over bathtubs and scrubbing floors. Sofia worked these multiple jobs, mornings at the office complex, evenings at the hotel, so that Maria could take fewer shifts. It was a silent pact between them. Sofia would trade her youth to buy her mother a little rest. By the time Sofia reached their small apartment building on the edge of the East End, the sky had turned a bruised purple. She climbed the 4 flights of stairs, the scent of garlic and frying onions wafting from the neighbors' doors. Inside apartment 4B, the air was warm. Maria was already at the stove, stirring a pot of soup that smelled of chicken broth and oregano. The television hummed in the background, a Spanish soap opera playing at low volume. Maria turned as Sofia entered, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes were bright and sharp. "You are late," Maria said, her tone a mix of accusation and relief. "I missed the bus." Sofia lied smoothly, kicking off her worn sneakers. She did not want to admit she had walked 20 blocks to save the fare. She kissed her mother on the cheek and moved to the small table that served as their dining area and desk. A stack of envelopes sat next to the salt shaker, the electricity bill, the rent notice, a reminder about the rising cost of their heating oil. Sofia felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the sensation of running a race where the finish line kept moving further away. "Sit," Maria commanded, ladling soup into a chipped bowl. "You look pale. You are working too much. Sofia, a girl your age should be going to parties. She should be meeting boys. She should be studying." "I am saving for school," Sofia said, taking the spoon. "We talked about this. Mama, once we have a cushion, I will take night classes. I will get my degree in business." Maria sat down opposite her, her own bowl untouched. She reached across the table and covered Sofia's hand with her own. Her skin was rough like sandpaper, but her touch was gentle. "You are wasting your beauty on bleach and dirty towels," Maria whispered. "I did not come to this country for you to have my knees. I have your eyes, though," Sophia smiled, trying to lighten the mood, "and your stubbornness." They ate in comfortable silence, the weight of the bills temporarily forgotten in the warmth of the meal. They spoke of small things, the leaky faucet in the bathroom, the way the neighbor's cat kept sleeping on their fire escape. It was a simple life, frayed at the edges, but it was theirs. The next evening, the city of Harborview decided to unleash its temper. A torrential rainstorm battered the streets, turning the gutters into rushing rivers of black water. The wind howled through the skyscrapers of the downtown district, rattling windows and turning umbrellas inside out. Sophia finished her shift at the office building later than usual. One of the executives had spilled coffee all over the boardroom carpet right before leaving, and Sophia had stayed an extra hour to ensure the stain did not set. She stepped out of the revolving doors and into the deluge. The noise was deafening. Horns blared as traffic crawled along the slick streets. The lights of the city reflected on the wet asphalt, creating a kaleidoscope of neon red and yellow. Sophia pulled her hood up, but the rain instantly soaked through her coat. She needed to get to the crosstown bus stop, 3 blocks away. She kept her head down, marching against the wind. The sidewalk was crowded with commuters rushing for cover, a sea of black coats and aggressive elbows. As she waited at the corner for the light to change, a commotion near the curb caught her attention. A yellow taxi was parked at an awkward angle, its hazard lights flashing. The driver's door was open, and a man was shouting, "I do not run a charity," the driver yelled, his voice rising above the sound of the rain. "You pay or you get out." Sophia squinted through the downpour. Standing by the open rear door of the cab was an elderly woman. She looked frail, dressed in a coat that looked expensive, but was soaked through. Her white hair was plastered to her skull, and she was trembling violently. She was digging frantically through a small leather purse. Her hands shaking so hard she dropped a lipstick onto the wet pavement. "Please," the woman said, her voice thin and panicked. "I left my wallet at the restaurant. My son will pay you when we arrive. I promise." "Cash up front," the driver barked. "I have been burned by this before. No money, no ride. Get out!" The brutality of it struck Sophia in the chest. This woman was someone's grandmother. She looked like she could barely stand, let alone survive being stranded in this storm. The light changed, and the crowd of pedestrians surged forward. Ignoring the scene, the city was indifferent. It did not care who it chewed up. Sophia did not think. She stepped out of the flow of foot traffic and approached the cab. The driver was reaching out as if to grab the old woman's arm. "Hey!" Sophia shouted, her voice surprisingly loud. The driver spun around, rain dripping from his nose. "What do you want?" "Leave her alone," Sophia said. She stepped between the driver and the old woman. She reached into her pocket. Her tips from the week were there. It was not much. It was the money for the heating bill. It was the money for fresh vegetables. How much to take her home? Sophia asked. The driver looked Sophia up and down, taking in her cheap coat and wet sneakers. He sneered. "It is a $20 minimum to the hills, plus tip." Sophia's fingers curled around the bills in her pocket. $20 was 4 hours of work. $20 was a lot. She looked at the old woman. The woman's eyes were wide with humiliation and fear. She looked ready to collapse. Sophia pulled out a crumpled wad of cash. She counted out $25. She shoved it into the driver's hand. "Take her," Sophia said firmly, "and drive carefully." The driver counted the money, grunted, and got back into the front seat. Sophia turned to the woman. "It is okay," she said softly. "He will take you now." The old woman stared at her. She reached out and grabbed Sophia's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her skin ice cold. Tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks. "You," the woman stammered, "you did not have to. I do not even know you. It is fine," Sophia said, ushering her into the back seat of the warm cab. She offered a tired smile. "Just get home safe." "What is your name?" the woman asked, refusing to let go of Sophia's hand. "I must pay you back. My son will want to thank you." Sophia shook her head. She gently pried her fingers loose. Just help your grandmother for the day, she joked weakly. I am nobody. Go. She closed the door before the woman could protest further. She tapped the roof of the cab twice, and the car peeled away into the traffic, disappearing into the sea of red taillights. Sophia stood alone on the curb. She was $25 poorer. She was wet to the bone. She was exhausted. But as she turned back into the rain to walk to her bus stop, the cold didn't feel quite as biting. When she finally arrived home, she was shivering uncontrollably. Maria scolded her immediately, rushing to get dry towels. Look at you, Maria cried, rubbing Sophia's hair vigorously. You will catch pneumonia. Where is your sense? Child, I gave away my tip money, Sophia admitted through chattering teeth as she sat by the radiator. Maria froze. You did what? There was an old lady, Sophia explained, pulling the blanket tighter. The cab driver was going to leave her on the street in this storm. She forgot her wallet. I couldn't leave her there. Mama, she looked so scared. Maria stared at her daughter. She looked at the worn furniture, the stack of bills, and then back at Sophia's earnest, tired face. The scolding died in her throat. Her expression softened, and her eyes shimmered with sudden emotion. You are a fool, Maria whispered, but she leaned down and kissed the top of Sophia's head. A kind, beautiful fool. God will return it to you. Sophia, you have a heart too big for this city. Sophia smiled wanly. I hope God returns it before the electric bill is due next Friday. Maria laughed, a wet, choked sound, and went to heat up leftovers. Miles away, the storm was just as violent, but it sounded different against the reinforced glass of the Moretti villa. Here, the rain was not a nuisance. It was atmosphere. It tapped politely against the windows of the sprawling estate that sat atop the highest hill in Harborview, overlooking the glittering, grimy city below. The iron gates swung open silently to admit the yellow taxi. It was an anomaly in a driveway usually reserved for black SUVs and imported sports cars. Elena Moretti stepped out of the cab under the protection of the portico. The front doors of the villa opened instantly. 2 men in dark suits stepped out, their movements synchronized and alert. One of the men moved to intercept the driver, handling the situation with a quiet, terrifying efficiency, while the other held an umbrella that was unnecessary under the roof, simply out of protocol. Luca Moretti appeared in the doorway. He was a man who commanded gravity, in his mid-30s. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than Sophia made in a year. His dark hair was swept back, revealing a face that was handsome in a severe, classical way. His jaw was sharp, his eyes a dark, intelligent brown that missed nothing. He did not look like a man who shouted. He looked like a man who whispered and saw empires fall. Mama? Luca's voice was low, laced with immediate concern. He descended the steps 2 at a time, ignoring the guards. He took her arm gently. You are shaking. Where is the car? Where is the driver I sent for you? There was a mix-up, Elena said, her voice still trembling as she leaned into her son's solid strength. I took a cab. I was foolish. Luca, I forgot my purse at the bistro. Luca guided her inside, into the warmth of the foyer where crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over marble floors. He signaled to a maid who appeared instantly with a warm shawl, the cab driver. He was horrible, Elena recounted, her hands fluttering. He was going to leave me on the street, in the rain. I was so ashamed. Luca's eyes grew cold. A muscle feathered in his jaw. He looked over Elena's shoulder at the head of his security detail, a subtle signal that promised violence for the driver later. But then, Elena continued, clutching the shawl, a girl appeared, a young girl. She looked like a drowned rat, poor thing. She paid him. She paid for my ride. Luca paused, his attention shifting back to his mother. She paid? She gave him cash, Elena said, tears welling up again. She looked like she needed that money. Luca. She was wearing a uniform under her coat. A maid, I think, or a cleaner. She put $25 in his hand and told him to drive me home. Luca led his mother to the sitting room and sat her down on a velvet sofa. He knelt before her, taking her cold hands in his warm, large ones. He rubbed them gently to bring back the circulation. Did she give you her name? Luca asked softly. No. Elena shook her head. She made a joke. She said she was just helping a grandmother. She would not take a reward. She just walked away into the rain. Luca kissed his mother's forehead, a gesture of profound tenderness that contrasted sharply with the lethal stillness of the men standing by the door. I am glad you are safe, Mama. That is all that matters. He stayed with her until she stopped shivering, listening as she repeated the story, praising the stranger's kindness. He ordered tea for her and waited until she was settled in her room with her personal attendant. Only then did Luca retreat to his study. The room was dark, lit only by the lamp on his mahogany desk and the glow of the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling window. The walls were lined with books and expensive art, but the room felt empty. It was a fortress of solitude. Luca walked to the window. He looked down at Harborview. It was a sprawling beast of a city, a place he controlled through a complex web of real estate, unions, and shadow agreements. He knew the politicians. He knew the judges. He knew the monsters who ran the docks and the thieves who ran the streets. In his world, nobody did anything for free. Every favor had a price tag attached. Every handshake was a contract written in leverage. The idea that a girl, a working-class girl by his mother's description, had parted with her own money to help a stranger with no expectation of return was alien. It was a glitch in the matrix of his cynical existence. He watched the rain streak the glass. He imagined the girl standing on the corner. The door to the study opened quietly. It was Marco, his head of security. The driver has been educated on manners. Boss, Marco said quietly. Good, Luca said, not turning away from the window. Marco hesitated. Anything else? Luca looked at his reflection in the dark glass. He saw the predator staring back. He adjusted his cufflinks. Find her, Luca said. Marco blinked. The cab driver, no. Luca turned around. The girl, the one who paid, track the cab's pickup location, check the security cameras in the area. Find out who she is. Marco nodded slowly, a confused look crossing his face. And when we find her, do you want us to bring her in? Luca shook his head. No. Do not scare her. Do not touch her. Just find me a name. Marco nodded and left the room, closing the heavy door with a soft click. Luca sat down in his leather chair. He picked up a crystal tumbler of whiskey but didn't drink it. He swirled the amber liquid, watching the light catch in the facets of the glass. He felt a strange sensation in his chest. It wasn't suspicion, though his life demanded he be suspicious of everyone. It was curiosity, a burning, itching curiosity. He wanted to know what kind of person gave away what they could not afford to lose. He wanted to know if such innocence actually existed in his city, or if it was just a trick of the light. And for the first time in years, he felt a desire to balance the scales not with retribution but with gratitude. He took a sip of the whiskey. The burn felt good. Find the girl, he thought. And then, for reasons he could not articulate, he whispered into the silence of the room, "Thank you." 3 days after the storm that had drenched the city of Harborview, Maria Ramos returned to the apartment with a spring in her step that Sofia had not seen in years. The older woman bustled through the door, her cheeks flushed pink from the wind, carrying a plastic bag of groceries that seemed lighter in her hands than usual. Sofia was at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of lukewarm tea and staring at a textbook she had borrowed from the library, trying to make sense of accounting principles that felt a world away from her reality. "Guess what happened today?" Maria announced, setting the bag down on the counter with a flourish. Sofia looked up, rubbing her tired eyes. She had just finished a double shift at the hotel and her feet were throbbing in a rhythm that matched her pulse. "You found a winning lottery ticket on the sidewalk?" "Better," Maria said, beaming. She began unpacking vegetables, her movements quick and energetic. "Mrs. Moretti called me. The nice lady from the agency? She said she needs a deep clean done on her son's apartment, a penthouse. Sofia, downtown. She specifically asked for me, and she said I could bring help. She said she would pay double the agency rate, in cash, for the day." Sofia frowned, instinctively wary. Rich people did not pay double for anything unless the mess was catastrophic or illegal. Which building is it? The Obsidian Tower, Maria said, the name rolling off her tongue like a prayer. Sophia sat up straighter. The Obsidian Tower was not just a building, it was a monument to excess. It pierced the skyline of Harborview like a shard of black glass, a place where senators and tech moguls lived above the smog line. It was on the other side of the city, a commute that would take 2 buses and a train. Mama, that is an hour away. Sophia sighed. I have the office job tomorrow night. If we go all the way downtown, I will never make it back in time. We are already stretched so thin. Maria stopped unpacking and turned to her daughter. Her expression was serious. Sophia, the money she is offering for one day is what you make in a week at the hotel. Just one day, we could pay the electric bill and put something towards the rent. Please, my back is sore, and I cannot do a place that big alone. Sophia looked at her mother's hands, twisted slightly by years of wringing out rags, and felt her resistance crumble like dry drywall. She could not say no, not when Maria looked at her with that mixture of hope and desperation. Fine, Sophia said, closing her textbook, but only this once. And if they are rude, we leave. They are not rude, Maria insisted. Mrs. Moretti is a saint. You will see. The next morning, the city was gray and steel cold. They took the early bus, watching the neighborhood change from the cramped brick tenements of the East End to the wide, tree-lined avenues of the financial district. By the time they stood in front of the Obsidian Tower, Sophia felt a familiar sense of shrinking. The building was massive, looming over them with an indifferent grandeur. The security desk was more like a border crossing. Men in dark suits checked their IDs against a list, their eyes cold and professional. They scanned Maria's bags and patted down Sophia's coat. It did not feel like entering a home. It felt like entering a vault. When the elevator finally opened on the penthouse floor, Sophia's breath hitched. She had cleaned nice hotel rooms before, the kind with mini bars and thread counts in the thousands. But this was different. This was wealth that did not need to shout because it simply existed as a fact of nature. The floors were marble, polished to a mirror shine that reflected the gray sky outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The walls were paneled in dark, rich wood that smelled of lemon oil and old money. Abstract art that looked like violent slashes of paint hung in gilded frames, and the furniture was low, modern, and intimidatingly leather. Sophia looked down at her own feet. Her white sneakers, scuffed at the toes, let out a sharp squeak against the marble. She winced. She felt like an intruder, a stain on a pristine canvas. Maria, however, was already in work mode. She tied her apron tight. Okay, Mrs. Moretti said she is staying in the guest suite downstairs, but she wants the main library and the living quarters up here spotless. I will go down and say hello to her and start the bathrooms. You take the library. Be careful with the books. I am always careful, Sophia said, pulling her rubber gloves on with a snap. Maria disappeared down a floating staircase, leaving Sophia alone in the cavernous silence of the penthouse. It was quiet, but not peaceful. The silence felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Sophia moved to the library. It was a massive room with 2 levels of books, a rolling ladder, and a desk that looked like it had been carved from the hull of a ship. She began to dust, her movements efficient and practiced. She wiped down the mahogany surfaces, careful not to disturb the precise arrangement of papers and pens. On a side table, she found a collection of framed photographs. She paused, her dust cloth hovering. The photos were of a man, in one. He was shaking hands with the mayor of Harborview, in another. He was standing at a charity gala, wearing a tuxedo that fit him like armor. There were pictures of him with the older woman from the cab, Mrs. Moretti, where he looked protective, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Sophia leaned in closer. It was a handsome face, certainly. Strong jaw, dark hair, eyes that seemed to look right through the camera lens, but even in the photographs, there was a current of tension in his posture. He smiled, but the smile never quite reached his eyes. It was a mask, a carefully constructed barrier between him and the world. He looks lonely, Sophia whispered to herself, surprised by the thought. She shook her head, annoyed at her own fancy. He was rich. He was powerful. He was definitely not lonely. He probably had models lining up to keep him company. She turned her attention to the bookshelves. The upper shelves were dusty, neglected. She dragged the heavy wooden ladder along the brass rail. It moved with a smooth, expensive glide. Sophia climbed up, her cleaning caddy hooked over her arm. She was 10 feet in the air, reaching for the top of a row of leather-bound encyclopedias. The sound of the elevator pinging open made her jump. She had expected to be alone for hours. Panic flared in her chest. She was just the maid. She was invisible. She reminded herself, just finish the shelf and get down. Heavy footsteps echoed on the marble floor. They were not Maria's shuffling steps. These were the confident, purposeful strides of a man who owned the ground he walked on. Sophia froze on the ladder, clutching her feather duster like a weapon. A man walked into the library. It was him, the man from the photos. He was wearing a dark blue suit, the jacket unbuttoned, his tie loosened at the collar. He was looking down at a file in his hands, his brow furrowed in concentration. He did not see her at first. Sophia held her breath. If she stayed perfectly still, maybe he would grab a book and leave. But then he stopped. He sensed something. Slowly, he lifted his head, his dark eyes scanning the room until they landed on her, perched high on the ladder. His expression was unreadable. He did not smile. He did not frown. He just stared. "Who are you?" he asked. His voice was deep, a baritone that seemed to vibrate in the quiet room. It wasn't a shout, but the authority in it hit Sophia like a physical wave. Startled by the direct address, Sophia tried to turn and descend at the same time. Her sneaker, the one with the worn tread, found no purchase on the polished rung of the ladder. She slipped. A small gasp escaped her lips as gravity took hold. She flailed, her hand grasping for the shelf, but she only managed to knock a heavy book loose. She fell backward. It happened in a blur, yet also in slow motion. She expected the hard impact of the floor, the crack of bone. Instead, there was a rush of movement, a blur of dark blue fabric. Strong arms caught her. The impact knocked the breath out of her, but she didn't hit the ground. Luca had moved with impossible speed, crossing the distance in a heartbeat. He caught her by the waist, his grip firm and unyielding, absorbing the momentum of her fall as if she weighed nothing. Sophia instinctively threw her hands out to brace herself, her palms slamming against his shoulders. Under the fine wool of his suit, she felt the hard ridge of muscle. For a moment, neither of them moved. She was suspended in his arms, her feet dangling inches above the floor. Her face was level with his. She was so close she could see the flecks of gold in his dark irises. She could smell him, a scent of expensive cologne, crisp linen, and something darker, like wood smoke and rain. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She stared at him, wide-eyed, shock rendering her mute. Luca stared back. His face was inches from hers, up close. The guarded expression she had seen in the photos was even more intense. There was a faint, jagged scar running along his jawline, a white line that disrupted the perfection of his features. It made him look dangerous. It made him look real. He did not set her down immediately. His hands lingered on her waist, his thumbs pressing slightly into the fabric of her uniform. Sophia felt a jolt of electricity zip through her spine at the contact. It was inappropriate. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. "Careful," Luca said softly. The single word broke the spell. He lowered her slowly until her sneakers touched the marble. He steadied her for another second, ensuring she had her balance, before he stepped back, his face smoothed over, the mask sliding back into place. "Are you injured?" he asked, his tone polite but distant. Sophia blinked, trying to restart her brain. "No," she managed to say. Her voice sounded breathless. "No, I am fine, thank you. I'm sorry. I should have been more careful." Luca watched her. He was studying her, cataloging her. He took in the messy bun of dark hair, the oversized uniform that could not hide her slender frame, the large, expressive eyes that were currently wide with panic. And then, recognition flickered in his eyes. He knew her. It hit him with the force of a physical blow. This was the girl. The description his mother had given, the petite build, the kind eyes, the specific cadence of her voice, it all matched. This was the stranger who had paid for the taxi. This was the girl he had ordered Marco to find. He had expected to read a name on a dossier. He had not expected to catch her falling from his library ceiling. He chose not to say it. Not yet. He wanted to see who she was when she thought no one was watching. "I am Luca Moretti," he said, extending a hand. Sophia stared at the hand. It was large, manicured, but calloused on the palm. She wiped her own hand on her apron before taking it. Her skin felt rough and dry against his. "Sophia," she said. "Sophia Ramos. I am with the cleaning service. My mother and I, Mrs. Moretti hired us." "Sophia," he repeated. The way he said her name, giving weight to the vowels, made her cheeks burn. "It is a pleasure. Sophia, please, continue your work. Do not let me interrupt." He turned and walked to his desk, sitting down and opening the file again. But the air in the room had changed. It was charged now, thick with an awareness that made the hairs on Sophia's arms stand up. She picked up her duster, her hands shaking slightly. She moved to the other side of the room, trying to make herself small, trying to fade into the woodwork. But it was impossible to ignore him. Over the next hour, Sophia worked in a state of heightened anxiety. Luca remained at his desk, but he was not silent. His phone rang constantly. He answered in a fluid mix of English and Italian, his voice shifting from smooth charm to icy command in the blink of an eye. "Yes, the shipment sits at the docks," he said into the phone, his back to her. "I do not care about the customs inspector. Pay him or threaten him. I am indifferent. Just get the crates moving." Sophia froze, her hand hovering over a bust of Julius Caesar. Pay him or threaten him? A few minutes later, another call. This time, his voice dropped an octave, becoming a low, dangerous rumble. "Tell Vincent that if he steps into the North Ward again, he will not walk out. Am I clear? I am done sending warnings. Next time, I send a surgeon." Sophia swallowed hard. A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning slid down her spine. She had grown up in neighborhoods where tough men stood on corners. But this was different. This was refined. Corporate violence. This was a man who ordered destruction while sitting in a leather chair wearing a $3,000 suit. She looked at him. He was making notes in a ledger, his face calm, almost serene. The contrast between his gentle behavior when he caught her and the ruthless words coming out of his mouth was dizzying. "Who are you?" she thought again. But this time, the question was laced with fear. The sun began to set, casting long, orange shadows across the library floor. The elevator pinged again. Luca hung up the phone immediately. His posture softened. Elena Moretti walked in, looking refreshed and elegant in a cashmere sweater. Maria walked a few steps behind her, carrying a tray of tea. "Luca, my darling, you are home early," Elena said, crossing the room to kiss his cheek. "I had some work to finish." "Mama," Luca said, standing up. He looked at Maria and nodded respectfully. "Good evening." Maria beamed. "Mr. Moretti, your home is beautiful." And then Elena saw Sophia. Sophia was standing near the window, trying to look busy with a bottle of glass cleaner. "Oh," Elena exclaimed. Her eyes lit up with genuine delight. She clapped her hands together. "It is you." Sophia smiled shyly. "Hello, Mrs. Moretti." Elena turned to Luca, grabbing his arm. "Luca, this is her. This is the angel I told you about, the one from the taxi." The room went silent. Maria looked confused. Sophia looked embarrassed. And Luca looked at Sophia with a gaze that felt like it was stripping away her layers. "I know," Luca said quietly. "We have met?" Elena rushed over to Sophia and pulled her into a warm embrace. Sophia stiffened, holding the spray bottle away so it wouldn't touch Elena's expensive clothes, but she eventually relaxed into the hug. "Thank you," Elena whispered. "You have no idea how kind you were. It was nothing." Sophia mumbled into Elena's shoulder. "Please, it was just a ride." Elena pulled back and looked at her son. "Luca, you must do something. You must thank her properly." Luca stepped out from behind his desk. He walked toward them, stopping a few feet from Sophia. The distance felt both respectful and predatory. "My mother is right," Luca said. His voice was softer now. lacking the razor edge it had held on the phone. You helped her when she was vulnerable. I owe you a debt. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a leather wallet. He didn't count the bills. He simply pulled out a thick stack of $100 notes. It was more money than Sophia had ever seen in one place. It had to be at least $1,000. Please, Luca said, holding the money out to her. Take this. As a reimbursement and a token of my appreciation. The room held its breath. Maria's eyes widened at the sight of the cash. It was rent for 3 months. It was textbooks. It was winter coats. Sophia looked at the money. Then she looked at Luca's face. He was watching her with that same intense curiosity, expecting her to take it, expecting her to be like everyone else in his world, transactional. Something inside Sophia rebelled. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the memory of the fear in Elena's eyes that night, a fear that money couldn't fix. Maybe it was the way Luca had threatened a man on the phone just moments ago. She did not want his money. She did not want to be paid for being a decent human being. No, Sophia said. Luca blinked. Excuse me? I said no, Sophia said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. I do not want your money. Luca frowned, his hand still extended. It is not charity. Sophia, it is repayment. You spent your own money. It was $25, Sophia said. It was a cab ride. I did not do it for a reward. I did it because she needed help. Maria looked like she wanted to faint. Sophia, child. She started. It is okay, Mama, Sophia said, not breaking eye contact with Luca. She lifted her chin slightly. If you want to pay us for cleaning the apartment, we will accept that. We worked for that, but I will not take money for kindness. It cheapens it. Luca slowly lowered his hand. The irritation flared in his chest. He was a man who did not like to be refused, but it was quickly overtaken by a surge of fascination. He looked at this girl, standing in her oversized uniform and squeaky sneakers, rejecting a stack of cash that could change her month, simply because of a principle. In his world, principles were flexible. Hers, apparently, were made of iron. He slid the money back into his pocket. Very well, Luca said. He studied her, a small, genuine smile playing on his lips for the first time. You are a stubborn woman. Sophia Ramos, I have been told that, Sophia replied, her cheeks flushing. Elena looked between them, sensing the sudden, thick tension in the air. She smiled a knowing, secret smile. Well, Elena said brightly, breaking the silence, then we shall just have to pay you extra for the cleaning, and I insist you stay for a cup of tea before you go. We really should be going, Sophia started to say. I insist, Luca said. He was looking at her again. The dark, dangerous businessman was back, but there was a light in his eyes now, a challenge. Sophia looked at the door, then back at him. She realized, with a sinking feeling, that she was already in too deep. Okay, she whispered. 1 cup. As Maria poured the tea, Luca sat on the edge of his desk, watching Sophia. He was intrigued, he was irritated, and he knew, with absolute certainty, that he was not going to let her walk out of his life as easily as she had walked into it. 2 weeks turned into a month, and the rhythm of Sophia's life began to fracture into 2 distinct realities. There was the reality of her cramped apartment in the East End, where the radiator hissed and the sirens wailed. And then there was the reality of the Obsidian Tower, where the air was filtered, silent, and smelled of white lilies and beeswax, twice a week, on Tuesdays and Fridays. Sophia and Maria took the long bus ride downtown. For Maria, it was the best job she'd ever held. Elena Moretti treated her less like a servant and more like a companion, often insisting that Maria sit and taste a new biscotti recipe or help her arrange flowers in the solarium. Sophia, however, found herself walking a tightrope. She cleaned the upper floors of the penthouse with a diligence that bordered on obsessive, trying to make herself invisible. But invisibility was impossible when the master of the house was watching. Her interactions with Luca were brief, sharp fragments of time that left her breathless. They passed each other in the long, marble hallways. He would be buttoning his cuff, heading out for a meeting that would decide the fate of a union contract. She would be carrying a stack of fresh towels. He would stop. He always stopped. "Good morning, Sophia," he would say. "Good morning, Mr. Moretti," she would reply, hugging the towels to her chest like a shield. His eyes would linger, dark and unreadable, tracing the line of her jaw or the stray curl escaping her bun. He asked about her classes, though she wasn't taking any yet. He asked if the heating in her building had been fixed. They were conversations about nothing. Small talk that should have been forgettable, yet the air between them crackled with a static charge that made Sophia's skin prickle long after he had walked away. One rainy Tuesday in November, Sophia arrived at the penthouse an hour early. Maria had a dentist appointment and would be coming later, so Sophia navigated the security checkpoint alone and took the silent elevator up to the sky. She expected the penthouse to be empty. It was usually deserted at 7 in the morning. She let herself in with the key card Elena had given her, stepping into the foyer. The apartment was dim, the gray morning light struggling to penetrate the storm clouds outside. She moved toward the kitchen to fill her bucket, her sneakers quiet on the floor. She pushed open the kitchen door and froze. Luca was there. He was standing at the massive granite island, his back to her. The armor of his suit was gone. He wore a crisp white dress shirt, but the top 2 buttons were undone, revealing the hollow of his throat. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, exposing forearms corded with muscle and dusted with dark hair. He was making coffee. The hiss of the espresso machine was the only sound in the room. He looked tired. His shoulders, usually set in a square line of intimidation, were slumped slightly, bearing the weight of something invisible. Sophia took a step back, intending to retreat, but her shoe squeaked. Luca turned slowly. He did not look surprised. He looked resigned, as if he had been waiting for a ghost and found her instead. "You are early," he said. His voice was rough, like gravel over velvet. It lacked the polished edge he used for the outside world. "I am sorry," Sophia stammered, gripping the strap of her bag. "I did not mean to intrude. I can wait in the lobby until you leave." "Stay," Luca commanded softly. He turned back to the machine. "Do you want coffee?" "Yes," Sophia said, surprising herself. "Thank you." She walked further into the room, setting her bag on a stool. The kitchen felt impossibly intimate. It was a space for families, for morning rituals, and here she was, standing in the semi-darkness with the most dangerous man she had ever met. Luca placed a small ceramic cup in front of her. The smell of rich, dark roast filled the space between them. He picked up his own cup and leaned his hip against the counter, crossing his ankles. He looked human, vulnerable. "You look tired," Sophia said before she could stop herself. "I do not sleep much," Luca admitted, blowing on his coffee. "The city is loud, even from this height, and silence is even louder." "I know that feeling," Sophia said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "My mother worries when I stay up. She says I think too much." "Mothers are paid to worry," Luca said, a faint, dry smile touching his lips. "Mine worries that I work too hard. She thinks I'm a legitimate businessman with a stress problem." Sophia looked at him over the rim of her cup. "And are you?" Luca met her gaze. His eyes were shadowed, heavy with secrets he refused to speak. "I am a businessman. Sophia, the legitimacy depends on who is writing the laws that week." It was an honest answer. It disarmed her. She set her cup down, suddenly feeling the need to do something with her hands. She reached for a linen cloth sitting on the counter behind him to wipe a small spill of sugar. "Excuse me," she murmured. Reaching past him, she misjudged the distance. As she leaned forward, her hip brushed against his thigh. The contact was electric. Sophia froze. Luca did not move away. Instead, he turned toward her, trapping her between his body and the granite counter. The air left the room in a rush. She looked up, startled. He was so close. She could see the individual lashes framing his eyes, the dark stubble shading his jaw. He smelled of espresso and cedar and warm, living skin. "Sophia," he whispered. It was not a question, it was a plea. He reached out, his hand finding the curve of her waist. His grip was firm, instinctive, steadying her though she hadn't stumbled. His thumb brushed the fabric of her uniform, sending a shiver racing down her spine. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that she was sure he could feel. She should pull away. She should remind him that she was the maid and he was the boss. She should run. But she didn't. She stayed. Her breath catching in her throat, her eyes locked with his. Luca's gaze dropped to her lips. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the brown. He leaned in, just an inch. The movement was slow, giving her every chance to stop him. Sophia felt a pull in her chest, a magnetic force drawing her toward him. She parted her lips, a silent invitation she hadn't meant to offer. For a heartbeat. The world narrowed down to the warmth of his hand on her waist and the proximity of his mouth. Then, Luca shut his eyes tight, his jaw clenched. "I cannot," he muttered, his voice strained. He released her waist as if her skin burned him. He stepped back, putting 3 feet of cold air between them. He ran a hand through his hair, destroying its perfect style. "I apologize," he said, his voice returning to a clipped, formal tone. "That was inappropriate. I am exhausted. Forgive me." Sophia stood by the counter, cold and bereft, her skin still tingling where he had touched her. "It is okay," she whispered, though her voice shook. Luca grabbed his jacket from the back of a chair. He did not look at her again. "I have a meeting. Please, finish your coffee." He walked out of the kitchen, his footsteps heavy and fast. Sophia listened to the front door slam, leaving her alone in the silence he hated so much. Downstairs, in the back of a black sedan, Luca stared out the window as the rain lashed against the glass. His hands were clenched into fists on his knees. He was furious with himself. He had almost crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. She was innocent. She was light. And he was a man who dragged everything he touched into the dark. His phone buzzed. It was Marco. "Boss." Marco's voice was tense. "We have a problem. Speak," Luca said. Grateful for the distraction of work, one of the perimeter guards clocked a gray sedan parked down the street for the last 3 shifts. "Plates are stolen. We ran the description. It looks like one of the Lazaro crew. They are watching the building." Luca went still. The Lazaro family was his primary rival, a group of brutal opportunists who lacked the code of honor Luca tried to maintain. If they were watching the Obsidian Tower, they were looking for weaknesses, patterns, leverage. "And who comes in and out of the service entrance every Tuesday and Friday?" Luca asked, his voice deadly quiet. "The cleaning crew," Marco said, "the agency staff, and the girl, Sophia, and her mother." A cold knot of dread tightened in Luca's stomach. He had been so careful to keep his family separate from his business. But by bringing Sophia into his home, he had painted a target on her back. She was a civilian. She had no protection, no armored car, no weapon. She was the perfect leverage. "Pull the detail from the warehouse," Luca ordered. "Put eyes on her. I want a shadow on Sophia Ramos 24 hours a day. If anyone gets within 10 feet of her, break their legs. Understood. Boss." Luca hung up. He looked at his reflection in the window. He looked like a monster. 3 nights later, the danger moved from the abstract to the immediate. Sophia had finished a shift at a law firm in the financial district. It was late, past 10 in the evening. She had missed the express bus again and had to take the local route that dropped her 6 blocks from her apartment. The rain had stopped, but the streets were slick and dark. The streetlights in her neighborhood had been broken for weeks, leaving long stretches of pavement shrouded in shadow. Sophia walked quickly, her keys laced between her fingers, a trick Maria had taught her. She was tired, her mind still replaying the scene in the kitchen with Luca, the way his hand had felt, the way he had looked at her. "Hey, sweetheart." The voice came from the mouth of an alleyway. Sophia stiffened and kept walking, picking up her pace. 2 men stepped out onto the sidewalk, blocking her path. They were not the polished guards from the Obsidian Tower. These men were rough, wearing hoodies and smelling of stale beer and aggression. "You in a hurry?" the second man sneered, stepping closer. He was big, blocking out the dim light from the corner store down the block. "Please let me pass," Sophia said, keeping her voice steady. "I have no money. "We don't want money," the first man said, grinning to reveal yellow teeth. "We just want to talk. A pretty thing like you shouldn't be walking alone. It's dangerous." He reached out and grabbed her arm. Sophia reacted on instinct. She jerked her arm back, slashing out with her keys. "Don't touch me," the man laughed, but his grip tightened. "You have got a temper. I like that." Panic surged in Sophia's throat. The street was empty. No one was coming. Suddenly, a blinding white light flooded the street. Tires screeched against the wet asphalt. A massive black SUV roared up the street, mounting the curb and coming to a halt just inches from the men. The headlights were like spotlights, freezing the scene in harsh relief. The doors flew open before the car had even fully stopped. Two men in dark suits, Luca's men, stepped out. They did not shout. They did not run. They simply unfolded themselves from the vehicle with the terrifying calm of professional soldiers. One of them reached into his jacket. The two harassers froze. They looked at the car, at the suits, and their bravado evaporated instantly. They knew what this was. This wasn't the police. This was something much worse. "Get lost," one of Luca's men said. His voice was bored, flat, or "stay and see what happens." The harassers scrambled back, tripping over each other in their haste to disappear down the alleyway. Sophia stood trembling on the sidewalk, clutching her chest. The rear door of the SUV opened. Luca stepped out. He looked furious. He stormed over to her, ignoring the rain that had started to fall again. He checked her over with a quick, intense scan. No blood, no bruises. "Get in the car," he barked. Sophia blinked, the adrenaline turning into shock and then into a sudden, hot anger. She was not a damsel in a fairy tale, and he was not a knight. He was the reason her life felt so complicated. "No," she shouted back, stepping away from him. Luca stopped, stunned. "No? Stop following me," Sophia yelled, her voice echoing off the brick buildings. "Who do you think you are? You treat this whole city like it is your personal chessboard. You cannot just stalk me and show up whenever you want." Luca's jaw tightened. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides. "You think I'm stalking you? You were being assaulted. Sophia, I can take care of myself," she insisted, though her hands were shaking. "You were 5 seconds away from being dragged into an alley," Luca roared, losing his composure. "Look around you. You should not be walking alone in this neighborhood at this hour. It is suicide. I live here," Sophia screamed back. "This is my home. Luca, I do not have a driver. I do not have a penthouse. This is my reality." They stared at each other, breathing hard, the anger vibrating between them. Luca looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the fear beneath the defiance. He saw the way she was shivering in her thin coat. His anger deflated, leaving only a sharp, aching worry. "Please," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Get in the car, Sophia. I cannot watch you walk home alone. Not tonight." Sophia looked at the retreating taillights of the harassers, then at the warmth of the SUV. She looked at Luca's face, which was etched with a genuine terror she didn't understand. She got in the car. The interior was silent and smelled of leather. Luca got in the driver's seat, dismissing his driver to the passenger side, and peeled away from the curb. He drove with aggressive precision, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Sophia sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, the silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until she couldn't stand it anymore. "What do you do?" she asked. Luca didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the road. "What? You have men who scare thugs away without lifting a finger," she said, turning to face his profile. "You have money you don't count. You talk about territories and shipments. What do you do?" "Luca, and do not tell me you are a businessman." Luca slowed the car as they turned onto the main avenue. He hesitated. He could lie. He could tell her he was in import-export or construction or waste management. It would be easier. But he remembered the way she had looked at him in the kitchen. He remembered her honesty. "I control certain parts of this city," Luca said slowly, choosing his words with agonizing care. "I ensure that things run smoothly. I settle disputes that the courts cannot settle. I protect people who pay for protection." Sophia felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. "Like the Mafia?" Luca flinched at the word. "It is more complicated than that, but..." "Yes, "It is not all clean. Sophia, my hands are not clean." Sophia stared at him, horrified. The rumors, the whispers in the city, they were true. She was sitting in a car with a criminal, a kingpin. "Stop the car," she said. "We are almost at your building," Lucas said, refusing to slow down. "I don't want your help," Sophia cried, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. "I don't want you anywhere near me or my mother. We are good people, Luca." "We work hard. We don't hurt people." "I know." Lucas slammed his hand against the steering wheel, startling her. "I know you are good. That is why I am trying to keep you safe." He pulled the car up to the curb in front of her apartment building. He put it in park and turned to her. His mask was completely gone now. His eyes were wide, desperate. "I never meant for you to be involved," he said, his voice cracking. "I just wanted to thank you. I wanted to help the girl who saved my mother. I didn't plan on any of this." "Any of what?" Sophia challenged, though her voice was barely a whisper. Luca looked at her lips, then up to her eyes. The feelings he didn't dare name were swimming there. Desire, protectiveness, a longing for a life he had forfeited long ago. "On your safety," he said, lying only by omission. Sophia reached for the door handle. She pushed it open, letting the cold night air rush into the heated car. She stepped out onto the pavement. She should just walk away. She should run up the stairs, lock the door, and never go back to the obsidian tower. But she paused. She held the door open and looked back at him. He was watching her like a man watching the last lifeboat leave a sinking ship. In a moment of conflicted impulse, Sophia leaned back into the car. Her face was inches from his. She saw the scar on his jaw, the exhaustion in his eyes. "I do not know what scares me more," she whispered, her voice trembling. Luca waited, not breathing. "Who you are," she continued, tears finally spilling over. "Or how I feel when you look at me like that." She pulled back before he could respond, slammed the heavy door shut, and ran toward the entrance of her building. Luca sat frozen in the driver's seat. The engine hummed beneath him, the only sound in the dead of the night. He stared at the spot where she had been, her words echoing in the silence of the car, louder than any gunshot he had ever heard. For 3 weeks, the silence between Sophia Ramos and Luca Moretti was louder than the noise of the city. Sophia stopped taking the Tuesday and Friday shifts at the Obsidian Tower. She filled her schedule with other jobs, scrubbing floors in the back offices of a dental clinic and wiping down tables at a 24-hour diner near the university. She told herself she needed the extra hours to pay for a new winter coat for Maria, but in truth, she was running. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart jumped, expecting a name that never appeared on the screen. She was haunted by the memory of the car ride, the smell of leather and rain, the raw confession she had whispered before fleeing into the night. Maria noticed the change. She saw the dark circles under Sophia's eyes and the way her daughter jumped at sudden noises. "Mrs. Moretti asks about you," Maria said one evening as she folded laundry. "She says the new girl from the agency misses spots on the bookshelves." "She misses your conversation." "Sophia, I am busy." "Mama," Sophia replied, keeping her back turned as she washed dishes. "The diner pays better tips." Maria sighed, shaking out a pillowcase. "It is not about the money, and you know it. You look like a ghost. Whatever happened between you and that family? Do not let it eat you alive." Sophia did not answer. She scrubbed a plate until her knuckles turned white. Across the city, in the steel and glass fortress of the Obsidian Tower, Luca Moretti was fighting a war on 2 fronts. The first front was against Vincent Lazzaro. Vince was a relic of the old world, a man who believed power was demonstrated through brutality rather than strategy. He had been encroaching on Luca's shipping routes for months, but lately, his attacks had become personal. He was probing, testing the perimeter of Luca's life, looking for a crack in the armor. The second front was internal. Luca sat in his office, the lights dimmed, staring at a surveillance report. He had kept his promise. He had a detail watching Sophia's apartment building around the clock. He knew when she left for work. He knew when she bought groceries. He knew she was avoiding him. Boss. Marco said, stepping into the room. "We caught one of Lazzaro's runners near the East End. He was asking questions at the local bodegas." "What kind of questions?" Luca asked, his voice low. Marco hesitated. He was asking about the maid service, specifically about the older woman who works the tower. And her daughter. Luca went still. The pencil in his hand snapped with a sharp crack. "They know," Luca whispered. "Vince knows I have a soft spot. Increase the detail on the Ramos apartment," Luca ordered, standing up and walking to the window. "If Vince Lazzaro thinks he can use them to get to me, he's going to find out exactly why I run this city." The separation broke on a Tuesday evening. Maria had come down with a fever, her face flushed and her joints aching. She refused to call out of work, terrified of losing the Moretti account, until Sofia physically took the phone from her hand. "I will go," Sofia said, tucking a blanket around her mother. "I will do the shift. You stay in bed." Elena Moretti had pleaded on the phone, her voice thick with worry, not for the cleaning, but for Maria. Sofia felt trapped. She could not abandon Elena, and she could not let her mother down. When she swiped her keycard for the penthouse elevator, her hands were shaking. The apartment was quiet. It was late, past 8 in the evening. Sofia moved through the rooms like a phantom, dusting, polishing, trying to leave no trace of her presence. She saved the living room for last. She found Elena asleep in a large velvet armchair by the window, a book resting on her lap. The only light came from a floor lamp that cast a warm, golden glow over the room, softening the harsh modern lines of the furniture. Sofia smiled softly. She moved to pick up a blanket from the sofa to drape over the older woman. The front door opened. Sofia froze. The heavy thud of the door closing echoed in the silence. Footsteps, familiar, heavy, exhausted, approached the living room. Luca walked in. He was soaking wet. He had clearly been out in the rain without an umbrella. His hair was plastered to his forehead, and his suit jacket was dark with moisture. He looked drained, his eyes hollowed out by stress and lack of sleep. He stopped when he saw her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air in the room shifted, becoming heavy and charged. The sound of the rain against the glass seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of their breathing. "Sofia," Luca said. His voice was rough. "I am filling in for Maria," Sofia whispered, clutching the blanket to her chest. "She is sick. I tried to be quiet." Luca looked at his sleeping mother, then back to Sofia. His gaze traveled over her, taking in her messy bun, her uniform, the nervous way she bit her lip. He looked like a man starving for water who had just found a spring. "Thank you," he said, stepping further into the room, "for taking care of her, for taking care of this place." "I should go," Sofia said, though her feet remained rooted to the spot. "Don't," Luca said. He walked toward her, stopping just outside of touching distance. The scent of rain and cedar engulfed her. He looked at her with such naked intensity that Sofia felt her knees weaken. "Why have you been hiding?" Luca asked softly. "Because I am smart," Sofia replied, her voice trembling. "Because you are dangerous, Luca, and because, Luca prompted. "Because I cannot stop thinking about you," Sofia admitted. The words tumbled out, unbidden. "I am terrified of who you are. I look at your life, at the men with guns, at the secrets, and I want to run. But then I look at you, and I do not want to run at all. It makes no sense." Luca closed his eyes for a second, as if her words were a physical blow. When he opened them, the darkness was gone, replaced by a burning, desperate heat. He took a careful step toward her. He raised his hand slowly, giving her ample time to back away, to leave, to end it. She did not move. He reached out and cupped her cheek. His hand was warm, his thumb calloused as it brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "I should tell you to run," Luca whispered, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "I should make you leave and never let you come back. But I am a selfish man." Sofia trembled under his touch. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs. She looked up at him, seeing the conflict warring in his eyes, and she made her choice. She closed the distance. She rose on her tiptoes and pressed her mouth to his. Luca stiffened for a fraction of a second. stunned, before a low groan vibrated in his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her flush against him. The kiss was not tentative. It was an explosion of weeks of repressed longing and fear. It was intense, hungry, and overwhelming. Sophia's fingers tangled in his wet shirt, gripping him as if he were the only solid thing in a spinning world. Luca's hand slid to the small of her back, pressing her closer, molding her body to his. They stumbled backward, their legs tangling, until they hit the back of the sofa. Luca didn't break the kiss. He deepened it, his mouth moving over hers with a desperate tenderness that made her head spin. She felt his heart hammering against her chest, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. For a moment there was no mafia, no rival families, no cleaning uniforms. There was only the heat of his skin, the taste of rain on his lips, and the overwhelming realization that she had fallen in love with him. Luca broke away first. He rested his forehead against hers, his breathing ragged. His hands were still on her waist, his grip tight, possessive. "Sophia," he breathed, his voice wrecked. "I shouldn't drag you into this darkness. You are the only light I've seen in years." "I am not afraid of the dark," Sophia whispered, her eyes closed, savoring the warmth of him. "You should be," Luca said. But he kissed her forehead, lingering there. The shrill ring of a cell phone shattered the moment. It was Luca's phone. The sound was jarring, violent in the quiet room. Elena stirred in her chair but did not wake. Luca pulled away, the loss of his warmth immediate and painful. He pulled the phone from his pocket, his expression hardening instantly into the mask Sophia hated. "Moretti," he answered. Sophia watched him. She saw the color drain from his face. She saw his eyes turn to ice. "When?" Luca demanded. "Was anyone inside?" He listened for another moment, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. "Read it to me," Luca said, "exactly as it is written." He listened. His eyes flicked to Sophia, and for a second she saw pure, unadulterated panic in them before he shut it down. "Burn it," Luca ordered. "Burn it all. I am coming in." He hung up. He stood there for a second, staring at the floor, his chest heaving. Then he looked at Sophia. The tenderness was gone. The heat was gone. In its place was a cold, impenetrable wall. "You need to leave," Luca said. His voice was flat. Sophia blinked, confused by the sudden shift. "What happened? My warehouse at the docks was firebombed 10 minutes ago." Luca said. He walked past her, moving to the desk to unlock a drawer. "Is everyone okay?" Sophia asked, reaching out to touch his arm. "Don't," Luca snapped, pulling away from her touch. He turned to face her. The look in his eyes was cruel. Someone spray-painted a message on the wall of the burning building. "Do you want to know what it said?" Sophia stared at him, fear cold in her stomach. "It said, 'Maids and mothers bleed the same,'" Luca said, the words cutting through the air like a knife. Sophia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "They know," Luca said, his voice rising. "They know about you. They know about Maria. Because I was stupid enough to let you into my house. Because I was weak enough to think I could have this." "Luca," Sophia said, stepping toward him. "We can figure this out." "No!" Luca shouted. Elena shifted in her sleep, and he lowered his voice to a harsh hiss. "There is no figuring this out. This ends now. You are done here. You and your mother are fired. I do not want to see you near this building again." Sophia felt as if he had slapped her. "Fired? Luca, please, you are scared. I understand." "You understand nothing," Luca interrupted. "You are a liability." "Sophia, you are a weakness I cannot afford. I need to focus on a war, and I cannot do that if I am worrying about a cleaner." He was lying. She could see it in the frantic way he wouldn't meet her eyes. He was pushing her away to save her, but the words were designed to wound, to make her hate him so she would stay away. "Is that all I am?" Sophia asked, tears stinging her eyes. "A liability? After what just happened?" "It was a mistake," Luca said, turning his back on her. "Go home, Sophia. Take your mother and go to the country if you have family there. Just get away from me." Sophia stood there for a heartbeat, devastation washing over her. She felt humiliated. She felt used. "Fine," she whispered. She grabbed her bag. She didn't look back at him. She walked out of the penthouse, the sound of the door clicking shut behind her, feeling like the end of the world. 2 days later, Sophia sat in a coffee shop near the university. The world had turned gray. The rain hadn't stopped. Daniel, a barista she had worked with the previous summer, sat across from her. He was kind, and he had a gentle smile and hands that had never held a gun. He had been asking her out for months, and today, in a moment of desperate need for normalcy, she had said yes to coffee. "You seem sad today," Daniel said, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "Is everything okay? It is just work." Sophia lied, forcing a smile. "I lost a big client. That is their loss," Daniel said warmly. "You are the hardest worker I know. Sophia, it was nice. It was safe. It was boring." Sophia looked out the window, and then her heart stopped. A black car was idling at the curb. Luca was standing on the sidewalk. He was watching them through the glass. He looked like a storm cloud that had descended onto the street. His coat collar was turned up, and his face was a thunderhead of jealousy and rage. He saw Daniel's hand on hers. Luca moved toward the door of the coffee shop. Sophia stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back. "I have to go," she said to a startled Daniel. "Sophia?" Daniel asked. "I am sorry," Sophia said. She ran for the door, intercepting Luca before he could step inside. She pushed him back onto the sidewalk. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. Luca looked over her shoulder at Daniel, his eyes dark with a dangerous possessiveness. "Who is he? That is none of your business," Sophia cried. "You fired me, remember? You told me to get away from you. I told you to be safe." Luca snarled. "I did not tell you to replace me with some college boy 2 days later." "Replace you?" Sophia laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. "You broke my heart, Luca. You threw me out. I'm trying to forget you exist." "You are doing a poor job of it," Luca countered. Stepping closer, he loomed over her, radiating heat and anger. "I have men watching your apartment to keep you alive, and you are out here playing house with him? You have men watching me?" Sophia was outraged. She shoved his chest. "Stop controlling my life. You do not own me. I'm trying to keep you breathing," Luca shouted back. "I would rather breathe without you than be suffocated by you," Sophia yelled. They were screaming at each other on the sidewalk, oblivious to the passers-by staring at them. The tension that had been building since the warehouse fire, the fear, the longing, the jealousy, finally boiled over. "You are reckless," Luca growled, grabbing her upper arms. "You walk around this city like nothing can touch you. And you are a coward," Sophia shot back, gripping the lapels of his leather jacket. "You push people away because you are too scared to let them love you." The word hung in the air between them. Love. Luca stared at her. His grip on her arms tightened, not to hurt, but to hold. His eyes searched hers, frantic and wild. "You are right," he whispered hoarsely. "I am a coward." He yanked her toward him. This kiss was different from the one in the penthouse. That one had been tender. This one was war. He kissed her hard, devouring her, pouring all his frustration and fear into the contact. He backed her up against the brick wall of the coffee shop, into the shadows of the awning. His hands roamed over her back, desperate to verify she was real. She was there. She was his. Sophia responded with equal force. Her hands gripped his jacket, pulling him closer, her fingers digging into his waist. She kissed him back with an anger that matched his, a fierce reclamation of the ground she had lost. They broke apart, gasping for air, their foreheads resting against each other. They were hidden in the shadows, but they both knew they were exposed in every way that mattered. "You are impossible," Luca groaned against her lips, "and you are a disaster," Sophia whispered back, refusing to let go of his jacket. "We cannot do this," Luca said, even as he leaned in to kiss her neck. "It is too dangerous." "Then stop following me," Sophia challenged, tilting her head back to give him access. "Stop showing up." "I can't," Luca admitted, his voice ragged. "I tried. I can't." "Then figure it out," Sophia said, pulling his face back to hers. "Figure out how to save yourself." "Luca, because I am not going anywhere." Luca looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the steel spine beneath the soft exterior. She wasn't asking for permission. She was giving him an ultimatum. He kissed her again, slower this time. A seal on a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. "Get in the car," he said against her mouth. "I am taking you home, and this time—" Sofia didn't argue. The war Luca had tried to keep at the edges of the city finally arrived at Sofia's doorstep on a Tuesday afternoon. It happened fast. Maria was leaving a cleaning job at a brownstone in the West End. As she descended the stone steps to the sidewalk, a man in a black hoodie brushed past her. It looked accidental, a clumsy shove in a crowded city, but the force was deliberate. Maria tumbled down the last 4 steps, landing hard on the concrete. The man paused just long enough to lean down. "Tell your daughter to choose her friends better," he hissed, before disappearing into the crowd. At St. Jude's Hospital, the fluorescent lights hummed with an irritating buzz that made Sofia's headache worse. She stood by the bed where Maria lay sleeping, her arm in a sling and a bandage on her forehead. The doctors said it was just a sprained wrist and bruising, but the image of her mother broken and bleeding on the pavement was burned into Sofia's mind. Luca stood in the corner of the room. He had arrived 10 minutes after Sofia, flanked by 2 guards he had left outside the door. He hadn't spoken since he walked in. He just stared at Maria's sleeping form, his face a mask of stone. "This is your fault," Sofia whispered. "She didn't shout. She didn't have the energy." "I know," Luca said. His voice was devoid of emotion, which was more terrifying than if he had yelled. He looked at Sofia. His eyes were cold. "Dead things. This ends tonight." "I will burn Lazzaro's entire operation to the ground." "No," Sofia said, turning to face him. "No more burning. Luca, that is what got us here. This was a message." "Sofia," Luca said, his hands clenching into fists at his sides, "if I do not answer, the next time they won't just shove her." Before the argument could escalate, the door opened. Elena Moretti walked in, looking pale but determined. She went straight to Maria's bedside, touching her friend's hand, then turned to her son. "We are moving them," Elena said firmly. "What?" Luca and Sofia said in unison. "They are coming to the villa," Elena stated. "Tonight, I have already arranged the rooms. It is the only place with a perimeter they cannot breach." "I cannot live with you," Sofia protested. "Mama would never agree." "Your mother was pushed downstairs because of my son's business," Elena cut in, her voice sharp. "Do not let pride get you killed. Sofia, you are coming to the villa." End of discussion. Luca looked at Sofia. He didn't argue. He knew his mother was right. It was the only way to ensure he could watch over them 24 hours a day. "Pack a bag," Luca said quietly. "My men will pick up your things." That night, Sofia and Maria were moved into the guest wing of the Moretti villa. It was a fortress disguised as a mansion. Guards patrolled the grounds with German shepherds. Cameras swept every corner of the estate. Life inside the villa was surreal. Maria, recovering quickly, spent her days with Elena in the sunroom. Sofia, however, felt like a prisoner in a gilded cage. She wandered the long hallways, feeling the weight of the house pressing down on her, and everywhere she turned, there was Luca. The tension between them shifted from the sharp, angry panic of the street to a slow, suffocating burn. It was domestic, intimate, and maddening. One night, unable to sleep, Sofia went down to the kitchen for water. She found Luca there, leaning against the counter in the dim light of the stove hood. He was wearing lounge pants and a white dress shirt that was unbuttoned halfway down his chest, revealing the dark hair and tanned skin beneath. He looked up as she entered. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "No," Sofia said. "The house. It is too quiet." Luca poured hot water from the kettle into a mug. "Chamomile," he said, sliding it toward her. "It helps." Sofia took the mug. Their fingers brushed. The contact sent a jolt through her that made her breath hitch. She looked at him, really looked at him. In the soft light, she saw a jagged, pale scar on his chest, disappearing under the shirt. It was an old wound, close to his heart. "How did you get that?" she asked, nodding toward his chest. Luca looked down, tracing the scar absent-mindedly. A disagreement. "Years ago, I was younger, slower. Does it hurt?" "Only when it rains," he said, looking back up at her. They stood in silence. the steam from the tea rising between them. They were so close. Sophia could smell the soap on his skin. She felt a magnetic pull, a desire to step forward and place her hand over that scar, to feel the heart beating beneath it. She looked away, flustered. "Good night, Luca." "Stay," he whispered. But she fled, her heart pounding, leaving him alone in the dark. The breaking point came 3 days later. Luca had been on the phone all afternoon, shouting orders. He was planning a retaliation strike on one of Vince's casinos. He was going to hit them hard. Sophia stormed into his office without knocking. "You cannot do this," she shouted. Luca looked up from his desk, startled. He waved his hand at Marco, who was sitting opposite him, dismissing him from the room. Marco left quickly, closing the door. "Sophia, I am busy," Luca said, rubbing his temples. "Busy planning a war?" Sophia demanded, slamming her hands on his desk. "If you attack Vince, he attacks back, and next time it won't be a shove. Luca, next time it will be a bullet." "It is the only language he understands." Luca stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I have to show strength." "You are showing fear," Sophia yelled. "You are reacting exactly how he wants you to. You are just a thug with a better suit." Luca went still. His eyes flashed with a dangerous light. "Is that what you think I am? A thug? I think you are a man who is terrified of losing," Sophia said, her voice dropping to a trembling whisper. "And you are so busy trying to win that you don't see what you are destroying. You are destroying us." "Luca." "Us?" Luca walked around the desk. He stopped inches from her. "Is there an us? Sophia?" Sophia looked up at him. The anger drained out of her, leaving only the raw, aching want that had been consuming her for weeks. "I don't know," she whispered. "You tell me." Luca let out a ragged breath. He looked at her mouth, then at her eyes. The restraint he had been holding onto with both hands finally snapped. He reached out and pulled her into him. It wasn't gentle. It was a collision. Sophia gasped as her chest hit his, but she didn't pull away. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling his head down, and kissed him with everything she had. Luca groaned against her mouth, a sound of pure relief and hunger. He kissed her back, his hands sliding down her back to grip her waist, lifting her slightly so she was pressed against him. He walked her backward until her hips hit the edge of the heavy oak desk. He lifted her easily, setting her on the edge of the desk, stepping between her legs to get closer. His hands were everywhere, in her hair, on her waist, cupping her face. "Sophia," he murmured against her neck, his lips trailing fire along her skin. "You drive me insane." "Good?" she breathed, her hands tangling in his dark hair. He pulled back to look at her. His eyes were dark, dilated, full of a raw need that stole her breath. He traced the line of her jaw with his thumb, his touch possessive but reverent. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough. "Because if we do this—" "I am not letting you go. Not ever. I don't want to go," Sophia whispered. He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper. His hand slid up her side, his thumb grazing the underside of her breast through her shirt. Sophia arched into his touch, a small sound escaping her throat. But as the heat rose, as the desperation clawed at them, Luca slowed down. He pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. His breathing was ragged. "Not like this," he whispered, not in anger, not because we are scared. Sophia blinked, dazed. "What?" "I want you," Luca said, framing her face with his hands. "God, Sophia, I want you more than I want my next breath, but not like this. Not as a distraction from a war. When I have you, I want it to be peace." Sophia looked at him, seeing the honor beneath the criminal. She nodded slowly, smoothing his collar. "Okay," she whispered. "Peace." He kissed her forehead, then helped her down from the desk. "We will figure this out," he promised. "I will find a way out." The promise lasted less than 24 hours. The next afternoon, Sophia insisted on running a quick errand. She needed a specific prescription for Maria from the pharmacy in the village, something the villa doctors didn't have on hand. Luca, reluctant, sent her with 2 guards in an armored car. It should have been safe, but Vince Lazaro had been watching. He had bought off a local traffic cop who flagged the car down on a quiet stretch of road. The phone in Luca's office rang. It was the lead guard, his voice gurgling with pain. "Boss, ambush. They took her." Luca dropped the phone. The world tilted on its axis. The cold rage he had felt at the hospital was nothing compared to the white-hot terror that flooded his veins now. Sophia was gone. She woke up in a chair, her wrists zip-tied behind her back. The smell of rust and salt water filled her nose. She was in a warehouse, large and echoing. Vince Lazaro stood in front of her. He was a small man with a face like a rat and eyes that held zero empathy. "So this is the weakness," Vince sneered, circling her. "Pretty, but stupid." Sophia lifted her chin. She was terrified. Her heart was beating so fast she felt dizzy, but she remembered Luca's face. She remembered Maria's strength. She would not cry for this man. "Where is Luca?" she asked, her voice steady. "Oh, he's coming." Vince laughed. "And when he does, he's going to walk right into a slaughter. You are the bait, sweetheart, and once he is dead, well, we will see if you are worth keeping around." Sophia looked him in the eye. "He's going to kill you," she stated simply. Vince stopped laughing. He slapped her, hard. Sophia tasted blood. She spat it on the floor and glared at him. Back at the villa, Luca was arming himself. He was strapping a holster to his chest, checking the magazine of a semi-automatic pistol. He was vibrating with lethal energy. Elena stood in the doorway. She looked at her son, seeing the boy she had raised turning into a weapon. "Luca," she said softly. "Don't try to stop me, Mama," Luca said without looking up. "I won't," Elena said, "but listen to me. If you go there only for blood, you will die. And she will die. You have to bring her back. Luca, that is the mission. Not revenge. Rescue. Do not lose yourself." Luca looked at his mother. He nodded once, stiffly. "Marco, get the team," Luca ordered into his radio. "We are going to the docks." The warehouse district was a maze of shipping containers and shadows. Luca's team moved like ghosts, taking out the perimeter guards with silenced weapons. Inside, Vince grew impatient. He paced back and forth, checking his watch. "He's not coming," Vince muttered. "He abandoned you." "He is here," Sophia said quietly. As if on cue, the lights in the warehouse shattered. Darkness plunged the room into chaos. Gunshots echoed, deafening and bright flashes in the dark. Men shouted. Sophia didn't wait to be rescued. She used the confusion to throw herself sideways, tipping the chair over. She landed hard on her shoulder but ignored the pain. She dragged herself behind a stack of crates, sawing her zip ties against a rusty nail protruding from the wood. Bullets chipped the concrete floor near her head. She squeezed her eyes shut. "Luca!" she screamed, hoping he could hear her over the noise. Luca was moving through the warehouse like a wraith. He fired with precision, dropping 2 of Vince's men. He wasn't looking for Vince. He was scanning the corners, the shadows. He saw the tipped chair. Empty. Panic flared, cold and sharp. Then he saw movement behind the crates. "Sophia!" He broke cover, sprinting across the open floor. A gunman appeared on the catwalk above. Luca didn't break stride. He fired 2 shots upward and the man fell. He reached the crates just as Sophia managed to snap the plastic tie on her wrists. She looked up, bruised, bleeding from her lip, her hair wild. Luca dropped his gun and fell to his knees. He grabbed her, pulling her into his chest with a force that knocked the wind out of her. "I have you!" He gasped into her hair, his hands shaking violently as he patted her back, her arms checking for bullet holes. "I have you! You are okay!" Sophia clung to him, burying her face in his neck. "I knew you would come," she sobbed. Luca pulled back, cupping her face. He thumbed the blood from her lip, his eyes dark with regret. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry. We have to go," Marco shouted from the doorway. "More are coming." Luca picked Sophia up in his arms. She tried to protest, to say she could walk, but he held her tight against his chest. "I am never letting you go again," he growled. He carried her out of the darkness, through the smoke and the noise, stepping over the wreckage of his world to carry the only thing that mattered into the light. The safe house was a world away from the obsidian tower. It was a modest, weathered cottage perched on the edge of a rocky cliff overlooking the Atlantic. Miles outside the city limits, the air here smelled of salt and pine, not exhaust and ozone. There were no marble floors, only creaking wood that settled with the wind. Luca had driven them there in silence, his hand gripping Sophia's thigh as if to ensure she was still real, still there. When they finally stepped inside, locking the heavy deadbolt behind them, the adrenaline that had sustained them through the warehouse rescue finally evaporated, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. Elena had insisted on staying at the villa with Maria. She'd been adamant, telling Luca that he and Sophia needed space to heal, to breathe, without mothers hovering over them. Now, standing in the quiet of the small bedroom, Sophia understood why. She sat on the edge of the quilt-covered bed. Her uniform was torn, her knees scraped, and her lips swollen. Luca stood by the window, staring out at the black ocean, his silhouette tense. He looked like a man waiting for a blow that had already landed. "You are shaking," Sophia said softly. Luca turned. He looked wrecked. The immaculate suit was ruined, stained with dust and grime. He walked toward her, sinking to his knees on the rug between her legs. He took her hands. His fingers were trembling. "I almost lost you," he rasped. The words were heavy, dragging along the bottom of his voice. "When I saw that empty chair, when I thought I was too late." "But you were not," Sophia said, leaning forward. She freed one hand to cup his face, her thumb brushing the dirt from his cheek. "You came for me. You saved me. I put you in that chair," Luca corrected, his eyes dark with self-loathing. "You were right, Sophia. I am poison. I draw darkness to everything I touch." Sophia shook her head. "No. You fight the darkness. That is different." She looked at him, seeing the vulnerability he hid from the rest of the world in this small, dim room. He wasn't the Don of Harborview. He was just a man who was terrified of being alone. And she realized, with a clarity that cut through the fear, that she didn't want him to be alone either. "Luca," she whispered, "look at me." He met her gaze. "I am here," she said. "I am alive, and I am not going anywhere." Luca let out a shuddering breath. He leaned his forehead against her knees. "God, Sophia, I do not know how to be gentle. I do not know how to have this. Then we learn," she said. She reached down, her fingers tangling in his hair, guiding his face up to hers. The first kiss was tentative, a question asked in the silence. "Are you sure?" Luca hesitated, pulling back just an inch, his eyes searching hers for any sign of hesitation, any flicker of the trauma she had just endured. "If the world ends tomorrow," Sophia whispered, her voice fierce and steady. "I want this moment. I want us." Something in Luca broke. A dam held back for years finally gave way. He stood up, pulling her to her feet, and wrapped her in his arms. This time, the kiss was not desperate or angry. It was reverent. It was a vow. He backed her slowly toward the bed, his movements deliberate. He treated her as if she were made of glass, precious and fragile, yet he held her with a strength that promised he would never let her shatter. Sophia arched into his touch, her hands sliding over the hard muscle of his shoulders, needing to feel the reality of him. Luca murmured her name against her skin, a low sound that vibrated in her chest. He traced the line of her spine with his palm, his touch searing through the fabric of her shirt. Every brush of his fingers was a declaration. Every press of his lips was a promise of protection. They moved together in the dim light, the sound of the ocean outside providing a rhythm to their breathing. When their foreheads met, they paused, sharing the same air, their eyes locked. In that gaze, stripped of titles and territories, they found a profound, terrifying truth. They belonged to each other. And for the first time in his life, Luca Moretti chose vulnerability over armor. He chose love over fear. Hours later, the storm outside had settled into a steady, rhythmic rain. They lay together under a heavy wool blanket, limbs tangled, the room lit only by the faint gray light of the moon filtering through the clouds. Sophia rested her head on Luca's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. His arm was draped over her, holding her close, as if he feared she might vanish if he let go. Luca was staring at the ceiling. The peace of the moment was beautiful, but it was fragile. He knew the world he had built was still waiting outside the door. "I cannot pretend this is safe," Luca said quietly into the dark. Sophia shifted, looking up at his profile. "I know." "Vince is still out there," Luca continued, his voice tightening. "And even if I handle Vince, there will be another and another if I keep doing what I have always done. If I keep running the city this way, you will always be a target. I cannot live like that, Sophia. I cannot spend every second terrified that someone will hurt you to get to me." "I do not want that either," Sophia admitted. She traced the scar on his chest with her fingertip. "And I do not want to be the reason you have to kill more people. I do not want our life to be built on blood." "I have to change it," Luca said. The words hung in the air, heavy and irrevocable. "I have to find a way out." Before Sophia could respond, the silence of the cottage was shattered by the harsh, jarring ring of Luca's secure phone. He froze. It was 3 a.m. A call at this hour meant only one thing: catastrophe. He reached for the phone on the nightstand, his body tensing, the lover vanishing and the soldier returning in a heartbeat. "Moretti," he answered. Sophia watched his face. She saw the color drain from his skin. She saw his eyes turn into black voids of horror. "Put her on the phone," Luca snarled. He listened for a second, then closed his eyes. "I will be there. 1 hour. If you touch a hair on her head, Vince, I will peel the skin from your bones." He hung up and sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "Luca?" Sophia whispered, fear cold in her stomach. "He took my mother," Luca said, his voice devoid of life. "What?" "There was a shift change at the villa," Luca explained, standing up and reaching for his clothes with robotic, jerky movements, a 10-minute gap in the perimeter. "We were focused on you. We were focused on the warehouse." Vince doubled back. "He has Elena." "Oh my God!" Sophia gasped, scrambling out of bed. "Where?" "The docks," Luca said, strapping his holster back on. "He wants a trade. Me for her. He wants to kill you," Sophia said, stating the obvious. "Yes," Luca said calmly. "He wants me to surrender. He wants me on my knees, and then he will execute me." "You cannot go alone," Sophia said, grabbing her coat. "I have to," Luca said. "It is my mother." "Sophia, I am coming with you," she declared. Luca spun around. "Absolutely not. You are staying here. I will send Marco to guard you." "No!" Sophia stepped in front of him, blocking his path to the door. "You are walking into a trap. Luca, you are running on rage. If you go there angry, you will make a mistake. You will start shooting, and Elena will get caught in the crossfire. I will get her back," Luca shouted. "You need me," Sophia shouted back. "I know, Elena. I know how to keep things calm, and I know you. If you go alone, you die. If we go together, maybe we can outsmart him. I will not risk you again. You are risking me by leaving me." Sophia grabbed his arms. "Look at me, Luca. We are in this together now. You said you wanted to change. You said you wanted a way out. This is the test. Do not go as the boss. Go as the man who wants a future." Luca looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the same courage that had made her pay a stranger's cab fare. She was right. He was blinded by fury. He needed her light to see the path. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth, "but you stay behind me. You do not speak unless I tell you. And if I say run, you run. Do you understand?" "I understand," Sophia said. The docks were a graveyard of rusted metal and black water. The industrial floodlights cut through the mist, creating harsh pools of yellow light on the wet concrete. The smell of diesel and rotting fish hung heavy in the air. Vince Lazzaro stood at the end of a long pier. He had Elena gripped by the arm, a gun pressed to her temple. Elena looked terrified, but she stood tall, her dignity intact even in the face of death. Behind Vince, 6 of his men stood with rifles raised. Luca walked down the pier, his hands held out to his sides to show he wasn't holding a weapon. Sophia walked 2 paces behind him, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She felt the tension radiating off Luca like heat from a furnace. Luca's men were positioned behind crates in the distance, a silent perimeter, but they couldn't fire, not with Elena so close to the edge. So, The king of Harborview finally descends, Vince called out, his voice echoing over the water. And he brought his girlfriend. How romantic. Let her go. Vince, Luca said, his voice steady. This is between us. It became between us when you took my territory. Vince spat. Kneel. Luca. Luca stopped 10 feet away. He looked at his mother. Her eyes were wide, pleading with him not to do it, not to sacrifice himself. I said kneel, Vince screamed, jamming the gun harder into Elena's head, or I paint the dock with her brains. Luca's hands twitched. Sophia saw the shift in his stance. He was calculating the distance. He was going to try to draw his weapon. He was going to try to kill Vince before Vince pulled the trigger. The odds were impossible. It was a suicide move. Sophia stepped forward. She placed a hand on Luca's arm. His muscles were rock hard, vibrating with the urge to kill. Luca, she whispered. He didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on Vince. Look at me, she pleaded softly, slowly, agonizingly. Luca turned his head. He looked down at her. Remember the peace, she whispered. Remember the promise. Do not become him. There is another way. She squeezed his arm. She was reminding him of the man he wanted to be, the man who drank tea in the kitchen, the man who wanted to build something legitimate. Luca took a deep breath. The red haze of rage receded, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. He looked back at Vince. I will not kneel, Luca said. Vince's finger tightened on the trigger. Then say goodbye to your mother. But, Luca continued, raising his voice, I will offer you a deal. Vince hesitated. What deal? Luca reached into his jacket slowly. Vince's men flinched, raising their rifles. Luca pulled out a single, thick envelope. This, Luca said, tossing the envelope onto the wet ground between them, is everything. The shipping routes, the bank accounts in the Caymans, the names of the judges on your payroll, and the evidence of the 3 murders you committed last year. Vince stared at the envelope. I am done. Vince, Luca said, I am walking away, but I am not leaving you the kingdom. What does that mean? Vince snarled. It means, Luca said, checking his watch, that the sirens you are about to hear are for you. In the distance, the wail of police sirens pierced the night air. Not one car, dozens. You ratified, Vince screamed, his face twisting in betrayal. You called the cops? You? I chose a different life, Luca said. Chaos erupted. Vince raised his gun, abandoning Elena to aim at Luca. I will kill you! Luca moved. He didn't draw a weapon. He spun, grabbing Sophia and pulling her into his chest, spinning his back to Vince to shield her with his own body. Pop! Pop! The shots rang out, but they didn't hit Luca. One of Luca's sharpshooters, seeing Vince move the gun away from Elena, had taken the shot. The bullet struck Vince's shoulder. Spinning him around, Elena threw herself to the ground. Police cars screeched onto the pier, lights flashing blue and red, blinding everyone. SWAT teams swarmed the area. Vince's men threw down their weapons, realizing they were outmatched. Luca stood in the center of the storm, holding Sophia tight. He wasn't fighting, he wasn't running, he was waiting. Elena scrambled over to them. Luca pulled her into the embrace, holding the 2 women who defined his world. It is over, he whispered into Sophia's hair. It is finally over. The weeks that followed were a blur of courtrooms and lawyers. Luca kept his word. He cooperated. He gave the authorities enough to bury Vince Lazaro for 3 lifetimes. In exchange, and in recognition of his surrender, his own sentence was reduced. He had to dismantle his organization. He had to pay massive fines. He had to serve time under house arrest and probation. The empire of the Obsidian Tower was dissolved. The illegal shipments stopped. The men in dark suits were let go. The city watched in shock as the untouchable Luca Moretti voluntarily tore down his own crown. But Luca didn't care about the city. He only cared about the woman who sat in the front row of the courtroom every single day, holding his mother's hand. 8 months later, the snow was falling gently on the streets of Harborview. It was a clean, white blanket covering the grime of the past. Sophia wiped down the table at the community center. She was tired, but it was a good tired. She had spent the day helping a family from Colombia fill out housing applications. It was honest work. It was real. A bell chimed at the door. She looked up. Luca was standing there. He wasn't wearing a $3,000 suit. He was wearing a simple wool coat and jeans. He looked younger. The tension that had defined his posture for years was gone. He looked like a man who slept at night. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." She smiled. Untying her apron, he drove them not to a penthouse, but to a small family restaurant in the Italian district. It was warm, noisy, and smelled of garlic and tomato sauce. In the back corner, a table was waiting. Elena was there, looking radiant, and Maria was there, her arm fully healed, laughing at something Elena had said. Sophia sat down, feeling a swell of happiness so large it almost hurt. They ate. They laughed. They argued about which wine was better. It was ordinary. It was miraculous. As the espresso was served, Luca stood up. The chatter in the restaurant died down. He looked nervous. Sophia had seen him stare down gunmen, but she had never seen him look this terrified. He wiped his palms on his jeans. "Sophia," he said. She looked up at him, her heart starting to race. "My life has been a long series of mistakes," Luca said, his voice trembling slightly. "I walked in the dark for so long that I forgot what the sun looked like, and then you paid a cab fare." Maria sniffled loudly. Elena handed her a tissue. "You saved my mother," Luca continued, his eyes locking onto Sophia's. "And then you saved me. You taught me that strength isn't about how much you can control. It is about how much you can love." He reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a diamond the size of a grape. He pulled out a simple, elegant ring with a single, clear stone. He knelt on the linoleum floor. "I do not have an empire anymore," Luca said softly. "I cannot give you a palace. I can only give you a man who is trying to be better every single day. I do not know if I can ever fully escape who I was, but I want to spend the rest of my life trying with you." Sophia stood up. Tears were streaming down her face, hot and fast. "Sophia Ramos," Luca asked, "will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, yes." Luca let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for months. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He stood up and pulled her into his arms. The restaurant erupted in applause. Elena and Maria were hugging, crying, making a scene, but Sophia didn't hear them. She only felt Luca. She pulled back to look at him, cupping his face in her hands. He kissed her. It wasn't the kiss of a desperate man in a rainstorm. It wasn't the kiss of a fugitive in a safe house. It was a kiss of hope. It was warm, steady, and full of a future that they had earned. The camera of their story lingered there, on their entwined hands, on the scar on Luca's jaw that was finally fading, and on the smiles of their mothers. It was not a fairy tale ending. The shadows were still there, at the edges of the frame, but in the center, in the warm, golden light of the restaurant, there was love, and that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Sophia and Luca as much as I enjoyed writing it. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment down below telling me which country you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this Mafia romance, please make sure to hit that subscribe button for the Mafia Romance Stories channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. Let me know your thoughts on the ending in the comments section. Until next time.